Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. Today we are talking about the latest studio album from Full of Hell entitled Coagulated Bliss. Since forming nearly 15 years ago in 2009, Full of Hell have become one of the biggest, boldest, and busiest bands within the realms of grindcore, power violence, and extreme metal music. They have an incredibly dark and demented and noisy and chaotic and violent sound which they have continued to refine and expand upon throughout the years as time has gone on. They have released something pretty much every single year since having formed, including 5 other full-length studio albums, with this one being number 6, might I add. Also, several EPs, several demos, several standalone singles, live albums, a compilation, a couple of remixes even here and there, splits with the likes of Nails and Code Orange, full-blown collaborative albums with the likes of The Body, Merzbow, Primitive Man, Nothing. They're also an absolutely bonkers and batshit insane live band. I remember seeing them on Halloween night here in Toronto in 2017 with Cattle Decapitation and Revocation. And it was Halloween, so everyone dressed up. Like Revocation had this weird gag where they all dressed up as Spider-Man because of like a fucking text that they misread in the group chat about dressing up as the Avengers or some shit. Cattle Decapitation showed up looking like a bunch of satanic priests. And then there was Full of Hell, who were just straight up just wearing diapers on stage. Like literal goo-goo gaga baby diapers. And despite that, I can very honestly say they put on a pretty intense show. Like, they weren't the headliners, but they very well fucking could have been with how fucking hard they brought the house down. With all of this in mind, there is obviously ample and valid reason to be thoroughly excited for Coagulated Bliss, and I am happy to report that if you enjoyed previous Full of Hell albums, and if you love everything funky and weird and eclectic or crazy about Full of Hell, and you're excited to see them get a little spicier, get a little bit more erratic and deranged, boom, you're gonna love this record. Sonically and structurally speaking, for the most part, this album falls in line with what we've more or less come to expect from Full of Hell over the course of the past few years, from records like Trumpeting Ecstasy, Weeping Choir, Garden of Burning Apparitions. The hurricanes of harsh noise and gritty, metallic, fast-paced guitar and blast beats and screaming vocals and nihilistic, depraved lyricism, it's all here. It all sounds fantastic. But I will note that there are some pungent spices and flavors, new ingredients mixed into Full of Hell's brutal broth to make it all the more powerful. Opening number Half-Life of Changelings, for instance, introduces some more unorthodox, almost Voivod-esque guitar tones and progressions, contrasting with the incredibly in-your-face, like, grindcore and power violence fury. It's just enough to give this thing, like, a slightly weirder vibe and presence, Like, it's Full of Hell, it's just a little off, but in the best way possible. Then there's Doors to Mental Agony, which throws in some very steady, mid-paced, almost kind of like noise rock, industrial rock kind of rhythms with pounding percussion and some extremely deranged and volatile vocal work. There is this little nugget of super explosive grindcore right in the middle of this that genuinely kind of caught me off guard. And the way that then transitions into these towering walls of screaming vocals and grimy bass licks and more pounding percussion, genuinely really cool and kind of freaky. Then there's Schizoid Rupture, which balances some more angular guitar riffage with some darker, more subtle, guitar-driven melodicism, and that is also anchored by some genuinely quite brutish and primitive, kind of like old-school grindcore menace. Like, there is some deep, bellowing, almost brutal death metal-style guttural vocals here, complemented with some shrieking vocals and screaming vocals, and it honestly kind of brings to mind some sick and twisted modern-day take on classic Carcass. Then there's stuff like Gelding of Men and Fractured Bonds to Mecca, which show Full of Hell going into much more unpredictable and avant-garde territory, with the former track being an intentionally semi-sluggish and awkwardly and angrily communicated collection of metallic poundings and emotionally charged outbursts, whereas the latter track almost takes us into the more experimental realms of Sightless Pit, with these really creepy vocal textures and electronic percussion and noise and static and feedback and some grittier guitar work. That said, though, the album's biggest and most brutal curveballs come not in the form of these two tracks, but rather in the form of Bleeding Horizon and Malformed Ligature, which show Flow of Hell flirting with depraved doom metal akin to that of what I might expect normally from Primitive Man. And they both do so quite differently, like Malformed Ligature throws in some grindcore-esque outbursts and some really strained and agonizing horns in between some doomy tones, whereas Bleeding Horizon is essentially Full of Hell just going full-blown death doom, with a lot of droning, feedback-heavy guitars, slow lumbering riffage, and some of the most brutal vocal work on the entire album. Can't believe I forgot to mention this, but there are some special guests on this album. Jacob Bannon from Converge screams his guts out on the aforementioned Malformed Ligature, and Ross Dolan of Immolation fame shows up on Gasping Dust. Really cool shit, really gnarly, really brutal. Mwah, chef's kiss. There are only 12 songs on this album, with the vast majority of them clocking in between 1.5 minutes and 2 minutes long, but I feel like this album is extremely action-packed, dynamic, and thrilling and exciting. It's everything that Full of Hell typically and consistently does oh so well, and it's also weirder and funkier and more erratic and more depraved and more unpredictable. I love how versatile the production and mixing and mastering of this album is as well. Like, sometimes it can feel really rough and really messy, kind of grimy and claustrophobic, and other times, you know, everything just has this big, bold, cavernous kind of feel and sound to it. Despite the inherent chaos of everything, too, everything is relatively crystal clear. Like, I can hear the guitars and the drums and the bass and all the different vocal dynamics and theatrics when I need to. Nothing is, like, drowning out something else. I'm feeling a very enthusiastic 4 out of 5, maybe leaning towards a 4.5 out of 5. Had they switched things up maybe just a little itty-bitty bit more, maybe they'd have been pushed into that 4.5 out of 5 territory, but whatever, it is what it is. Maybe I'll feel differently in a couple of months and I'll just push it in that territory myself. For the time being, 4 out of 5 feels appropriate, that feels right, whatever. This album is fucking great. Now, it is very fair to say that if you don't like Full of Hell, you're probably not going to like this album, and I know from having been online, there are a lot of people that really don't like Full of Hell. Hi, Jimmy from the block. How are ya? I would not recommend you check out this album. But personally, I really enjoy a lot of the stuff that Full of Hell has done. I feel like this is their biggest and craziest and most brutal album in a while, and it makes me excited to hear more from them realistically in a couple of months. Like I said, these guys, they never stop. They work all the time. It would not shock me at all if we heard another Full of Hell album or EP, maybe a collaborative album, within the next year, maybe even before the end of this year. It really fucking wouldn't, honestly. But whatever, we can only cross a bridge when we get to it. This is all speculative. Who fucking knows? Who fucking cares? Let's just have fun with Coagulated Bliss for now. 4 out of 5, great album, definitely check it out. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be. So what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe right here so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.